Hey everyone, and welcome back. If you're looking for that quick but insightful download on what's been shaking up the crypto markets over the past 12 hours, you've come to the right place.
Yeah, the past 12 hours have been a whirlwind.
For sure. We're seeing Bitcoin absolutely surging, Ethereum climbing right alongside it. And honestly, it feels like all anyone can talk about is this upcoming White House crypto summit.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely the talk of the town right now.
Right. You guys have sent us some great sources to help make sense of it all, too.
Yeah, we've got some good stuff to dive into.
Definitely, including the Crypto Pulse podcast, which is always a fantastic source of insights. So let's get right into it.
Sounds good. What's been really fascinating to me is how quickly the sentiment has shifted in the market. I mean, earlier this week, the Crypto Pulse podcast was talking about how the fear and greed index was down at like 20.
Whoa, a 20.
Yeah, basically signaling extreme fear in the market. But now look at Bitcoin. It's up a solid 8.5%. It just broke through $92,000.
Huge. And Ethereum's not too far behind either.
Nope, up 6.5% at $2,300.
That fear and greed index is a really handy tool to gauge, like, how jittery or optimistic traders are feeling, right? I mean, a score of 20 really suggests people were like one step away from panic selling.
Oh, absolutely. A 20 is definitely a sign people are ready to head for the exits. But it seems like right now the anticipation for this White House crypto summit is outweighing all those recent market jitters.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. This is kind of a landmark event, right? This is the first time a sitting U.S. president is formally meeting with leaders from the crypto industry. No wonder the speculation's running wild.
It's like everyone's holding their breath to see what's going to happen.
Exactly. Especially all this buzz about a potential U.S. strategic crypto reserve.
Yeah.
That's got everyone talking.
Yeah, that's the writer that's really got the market buzzing.
I mean, what even is a strategic crypto reserve? Is this like Fort Knox, but for Bitcoin?
Well, yeah, you could think of it that way. Imagine a national stockpile, but instead of gold, it's Bitcoin. Maybe other cryptocurrencies too. If the U.S. government starts treating crypto like a strategic asset, that could be a huge deal for the industry. It would lend a lot of legitimacy to the space and could really attract those big institutional investors.
It's like the ultimate stamp of approval.
Exactly.
So basically what we're seeing now is that classic buy the rumor behavior ahead of the summit, right?
It makes sense, but is it just retail investors jumping in? Or are we seeing bigger players getting in on the action too?
That's where things start to get really interesting. We're actually seeing signs of both. Sure, there's a ton of excitement at the retail level, but institutions are also making some pretty strategic moves. Take Circle, for example, the company behind the USDC stablecoin. They just minted another 250 million USDC on the Solana blockchain.
Wait, so while those FTX liquidators are busy selling off millions of dollars worth of Solana, Circle's doubling down on it, that sounds like a huge vote of confidence.
It really does, right?
Yeah.
It suggests that even with all the FTX drama and the potential for more volatility, some institutions are still super bullish on Solana's long-term prospects. It really highlights that contrast between the more speculative, short-term, buy-the-rumor behavior and the longer-term strategic thinking from these big institutions.
For sure. I mean, it's like two different worlds colliding.
Totally. It feels like this White House crypto summit is becoming the focal point for a lot of this market activity. But Bitcoin and Ethereum aren't the only players in the game, right? What else has been happening that we should be paying attention to?
Oh, you're absolutely right. There's a lot more going on. For example, we're seeing some really interesting developments in other sectors of the crypto market, like DeFi, decentralized finance. Remember DeFi?
Oh, yeah. DeFi was all the rage for a while there, but things kind of quieted down. What's driving this resurgence?
Well, for one, AAVE, one of the leading lending protocols in DeFi, is making some big waves with their proposed tokenomics revamp. They're talking about doing weekly AAVE token buybacks, and they've also got this new umbrella mechanism to protect users from bad debt.
It sounds like they're trying to tackle some of the big concerns that have held DeFi back in the past, like stability and risk.
Exactly. They're trying to build more trust and security into the system, and the market seems to like it too. AAVE's price has skyrocketed in the last day, something like 26.25%.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah. Investors are clearly looking for those DeFi projects that prioritize sustainability and user protection.
Okay, so let me try to sum this up. We've got Bitcoin and Ethereum rallying, anticipation building around the White House crypto summit, and DeFi showing signs of a comeback. But I know there's so much more happening in the crypto market. What about some of the other major players and those intriguing altcoins? What's going on there?
That's where things get even more interesting. We're seeing that same divergence between institutional confidence and retail speculation playing out in some pretty fascinating ways. That's where things get even more interesting. We're seeing that same divergence between institutional confidence and retail speculation playing out in some pretty fascinating ways. Take Solana, for instance. Despite all the pressure from those FTX liquidations, it's shown some serious resilience.
It really has.
Even with those big chunks of SOL being moved around, like today our sources show 58,964 SOL, worth about $8.52 million, was transferred to Binance, but it's holding relatively steady.
It's fascinating that even with those liquidations still happening, Solana isn't just like completely tanking.
Yeah.
Is this a sign that the market really believes in its potential in the long run, or are people just kind of downplaying the risks?
I think it's probably a combination of both, to be honest. I mean, there's definitely a level of risk that comes with those liquidations, but the fact that it's not like plummeting suggests at least some degree of confidence in its technology, its future, you know?
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see how it plays out.
Right. But then on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, we have Cardano making a splash for completely different reasons.
And Cardano. They've been quietly building and improving their platform. What's behind their recent surge?
Well, the Crypto Pulse podcast pointed this out, and it's pretty interesting. There's been some major whale activity. We're talking massive accumulation of ADA, which is Cardano's native token.
How massive are we talking?
Huge. Think like 420 million ADA being scooped up.
Wow.
It seems like some big players are placing their bets on Cardano being included in that potential strategic crypto reserve we were talking about earlier.
So even though Cardano hasn't officially been named as part of any kind of reserve plan, yet these whales are making a pretty calculated gamble.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely hoping to ride that wave if it happens.
It's a bold move for sure, considering how much uncertainty there still is.
Absolutely. And it really highlights that classic thing about the crypto market. High risk, high reward. This is all speculation at this point. If Cardano doesn't make it into that reserve, well, those whales could find themselves in a tough spot.
It's a good reminder that while the potential rewards in crypto can be huge, it's so important to be aware of the risks too, and to never invest more than you can afford to lose. Speaking of potential and risk, what about some of the other altcoins out there? Any interesting developments we should know about?
Oh, absolutely. XRP is making a bit of a comeback lately, probably because of some positive news on the regulatory front, and it seems like we're seeing more institutional players getting interested in it.
Interesting.
And then there's Chainlink, which is seeing some gains thanks to their tech that helps lower those pesky transaction costs on the Ethereum network.
So it's not just the big players like Bitcoin and Ethereum making moves. The whole crypto ecosystem is alive and kicking, with different trends emerging all the time. We talked about the DeFi resurgence earlier, but are there any other, sector-specific trends that are worth highlighting?
You're so right. There's always something interesting happening in the crypto world. One thing to note is that layer 2 networks, remember, those were all the rage a while back. They seem to be cooling off a bit. But at the same time, liquid restaking tokens are continuing on this strong growth trajectory.
Liquid restaking tokens. Okay, I have to admit that's a new one for me and probably for a lot of our listeners too. Can you break that down for us? What are they and why are they gaining so much traction?
Sure. So basically, think of it this way. When you stake your crypto, you're helping to secure a blockchain network, and you earn rewards for that. But traditionally, when you stake, your tokens are locked up for a certain period of time. Liquid restaking tokens allow you to keep earning those staking rewards, but you still have access to the liquidity of your assets.
So it's all about having your cake and eating it too.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense why they would be gaining popularity. But let's zoom out from these individual trends and specific coins for a minute. What's the overall feeling in the crypto world right now? Is it all sunshine and roses with these recent rallies, or is there still a sense of caution in the air?
That's a really good question. The Crypto Pulse podcast actually did a sentiment analysis, based on all the chatter on social media, and it seems like the mood is one of cautious optimism.
So a little bit of buy the rumor excitement mixed with some wait-and-see prudence?
Yeah, pretty much.
But let's be real, the White House Crypto Summit is kind of the elephant in the room right now. Everyone's holding their breath to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, true. This summit has the potential to be a huge turning point for the crypto industry in the U.S., especially when you look at what's happening with regulations around the world. The EU has its MiCA framework already in place. Hong Kong is pushing its crypto-friendly Aspire roadmap. And even the US seems to be shifting away from that enforcement-heavy approach towards something that's a little bit more focused on fostering innovation.
So it sounds like regulation is becoming a more and more important factor in shaping the future of crypto. Would you say that the U.S. is kind of playing catch-up at this point, given how proactive some other regions have been?
I think that's a fair assessment. The EU and the Asian markets have definitely been more proactive in establishing clear regulatory frameworks. But with this White House Crypto Summit, the U.S. has a real chance to show that it's serious about becoming a leader in the crypto space. I bet our listeners are thinking, okay, this is all very interesting, but what does this mean for me? How can I make sense of all this information and apply it to my own understanding of the crypto market?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've covered a ton of ground today. Market rallies, the buzz around the White House Crypto Summit, the DeFi resurgence, those big institutional moves, and the whole evolving regulatory landscape. It's a lot to process. How can we help our listeners make sense of it all and maybe give them some actionable insights?
I think a good way to think about it is to consider different scenarios, especially focusing on how that White House Crypto Summit might play out and how it might affect the market. What if we think about a base case, a bull case, and a bear case scenario? Each one paints a different picture of what could happen with Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and the broader crypto market.
I like that approach. It's like creating a roadmap to navigate all the potential twists and turns ahead. So let's start with that base case scenario. What does that look like?
All right, so in our base case, the summit generates some positive headlines. Maybe there's some good press coverage, but it doesn't lead to any big policy changes. Maybe they announce the formation of a working group to look into that strategic crypto reserve idea, but nothing concrete just yet. In this scenario, we'd probably see Bitcoin kind of hanging out in that $85,000 to $95,000 range, with Ethereum hovering between $2,100 and $2,500. Solana might get a little bump, but I'd expect it to stay somewhere between $140 and $160.
So kind of a classic buy the rumor, sell the news situation. The initial excitement fades as the market realizes there's no immediate action. Makes sense. But let's dream big for a minute. What does the bull case look like? What if the summit just blows everyone's expectations out of the water?
Now we're talking. Imagine President Trump steps up and announces a clear, decisive plan for a U.S. strategic crypto reserve. Maybe even with some initial allocations for Bitcoin and Ethereum. That would send shockwaves through the market for sure. We could easily see Bitcoin surging towards $100,000, maybe even $120,000. And of course, Ethereum would probably follow suit, maybe even breaking through that $3,000 barrier.
Okay, that's a rally I think a lot of people would be pretty excited about. But we do have to stay grounded in reality here. There's always a chance things could go the other way. What does the bear case scenario look like? What could potentially trigger a market downturn?
Well, in the bear case, the summit kind of falls short of expectations. Maybe there are some vague statements about regulation, or some officials make negative comments, or even just some unforeseen bad news, like something to do with those MGOX Bitcoin transfers.
I see that happening.
Something like that could easily trigger a risk-off sentiment. People start getting nervous, and Bitcoin gets pushed back down to that $70,000 to $80,000 range.
So it's that classic flight to safety where investors get spooked and run back to those more stable assets. Would you expect altcoins to take a bigger hit than Bitcoin and Ethereum in that scenario?
Most likely, yeah. Especially those altcoins that have been rallying based purely on speculation. Those are always seen as riskier bets compared to the more established players like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
It seems like we've laid out a pretty clear roadmap for our listeners today. We've got our base case, our bull case, and our bear case, each one with its own potential market reactions depending on how things shake out at that White House Crypto Summit.
Yeah, I think that covers it pretty well.
It's a good reminder that while crypto can be super exciting and potentially very lucrative, it's really crucial to be prepared for volatility and to manage your risk carefully.
Couldn't agree more. It's all about having a balanced perspective, right? Don't get caught up in the hype, but don't dismiss the potential either. Just stay informed, do your research, and remember, only invest what you can afford to lose.
Words to live by. We've covered a lot in this rapid-fire deep dive, but you know there's always more to explore. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you think our listeners should be keeping an eye on? Any trends or developments that have you particularly intrigued?
There's one thing that keeps coming back to me, this idea of a U.S. strategic crypto reserve. It's not just about the U.S. maybe holding Bitcoin, it's about the signal it sends to the rest of the world.
Okay, I'm curious. Explain what you mean.
Think about it. If the U.S., with all its economic power, embraces crypto as a strategic asset, how could that change the global financial system? Could it lead to other countries doing the same thing?
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about it like that before.
It could legitimize crypto even further and potentially even shift the balance of power in the financial world.
Whoa. That's a big thought. It's almost like two different visions of the future clashing here. On one hand, you have this decentralized, permissionless ideal of crypto. And on the other, you have these nation states trying to figure out how to exert their influence within this new space.
Exactly. And how that tension plays out, that's going to be fascinating to watch. What happens to DeFi, for example, with its vision of an open and accessible financial system if governments become these major players in the crypto game? Does it help or hurt DeFi's progress?
So many questions. It seems like the next few months, especially with this White House Crypto Summit coming up, are going to be crucial in determining what direction the crypto space takes. So for our listeners who have been with us on this whirlwind tour of the crypto markets, what's the one key takeaway you'd like them to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. The crypto market is at a crossroads. You've got technological innovation pushing the boundaries, institutional interest growing like crazy, and now governments stepping in with their own crypto strategies. It's a wild, unpredictable, and incredibly exciting space to be a part of.
Exciting is definitely the word for it. And maybe a little bit nerve-wracking, too, if I'm being honest.
Oh, for sure. But hey, that's part of what keeps things interesting, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about today, there are potential upsides and downsides to consider. This isn't like a hands-off investment, you know. You have to stay engaged, stay informed, and be ready for a few roller coaster rides along the way.
Well said.
I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about as they navigate the crypto waters. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Just this. Stay curious, stay engaged, and never be afraid to question what you think you know. Change is the only constant in the crypto world, so embrace it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks so much for joining us for another deep dive into the world of crypto. Until next